Hello and welcome to Backseat Blackout for another intense, action-packed rollercoaster of an episode. I am Chris, and we're joined by the fabulous theme park blogger, vlogger, fashionista, Jordan from Cupcakes and Coasters. Today we're going to take a look at the coasters that truly made an impact, coasters that went beyond the capabilities of what coasters could do, coasters that no other coaster dares to be, because these coasters are the risk takers, the innovators, the pioneers, the feared, the fascinating, the forceful, the f***ed up, and most importantly,
the coasters that took it too far.
That's a little too dramatic.
Just a little bit, Chris.
You're watching Backseat Blackout, and this is 7 coasters that took it too far, featuring Cupcakes and Coasters. Let's travel back to the 1990s, a time where coasters became a little more experimental, a little braver, and most important, more extreme. Here we saw the birth of the vertical drop coaster, a design that didn't really peak popularity until recent years, with additions rocking up such as Baron 1898 and the upcoming Yukon Striker. Oblivion was the first coaster to deliver this style of drop, and whilst it definitely delivered, it still wasn't enough. You were 3 degrees off, Oblivion. 3 degrees.
I don't know, even though Oblivion does fall slightly short of that proper vertical 90-degree drop, it just does things to me.
So flash forward 4 years to the other side of the hemisphere where we find Gold Reef City. It appears that South Africa wanted a piece of the vertical drop action, but they wanted to take it a few steps further. Tower of Terror at Gold Reef City was the first true 90-degree vertical drop coaster, but not only was the drop 90 degrees, they also made a bold decision to make the drop twisted. Built on an authentic tower from a gold mine, this coaster plummets 164 feet, pulling an overwhelming 6.3 Gs, more than any other coaster operating today. Apparently during testing this coaster, the G spike was hitting just under 11 Gs, which required them to restructure the pullout. Apparently. If even that wasn't enough, this coaster originally opened with lap bars but was changed to over-shoulder restraints due to safety concerns. Tower of Terror has had a pretty rocky history. It was said that safety and maintenance issues on the coaster caused it to close down for 2 years in 2005. Again, information on this coaster is very sparse. Even more interestingly, designer Ronald Bussing states that it was Giovanola who built this coaster. However, Giovanola denied having any involvement, possibly due to its troubled history. To this day, the manufacturer of Tower of Terror remains unknown.
Next, let's head over to the sleepy Midwestern state of Ohio, famous for its Great Lakes, Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, and weirdly enough, the roller coaster capital of the world. Not only will you find Cedar Point, America's roller coaster, we see what you did there, Cedar Point, you'll also find Kings Island, previously known as Paramount Kings Island until the park was sold to Cedar Fair in 2006. Having opened in 1979, the park's signature wooden coaster, the Beast, was absolutely legendary, and still is to this day. Being owned and operated by a film company at the time, it makes total sense that the park endeavoured to capitalise on the popularity of their iconic wooden coaster with, what else, a sequel. And let's face it, sequels never live up to the originals. You can see where this is going. Constructed by the now defunct Roller Coaster Corporation of America, Son of Beast opened in May 2000 and was the world's first wooden hypercoaster, clocking in at an eye-watering 218 feet. And if the staggering height wasn't enough, the madmen at Paramount and RCCA decided that the coaster was still missing a certain je ne sais quoi, so they thought screw it and added in a colossal 118-foot vertical loop just after the first drop, just to add a little bit of extra spice. Anything for those sweet, sweet marketing hooks. As is the fate of many a sequel, Son of Beast bit off ever so slightly more than it can chew in its pursuit of capitalising on Beast's fandom. In 2006, damage to the track caused a train to stop abruptly, prompting the park to close the coaster for the 2007 season to make some alterations, sadly including the removal of the loop to allow for use of lighter trains, purchased from the defunct Myrtle Beach Pavilion Hurricane coaster. Sadly, it just wasn't enough, and after a series of setbacks, the park made the decision to close the coaster forever in 2009 after just 8 years of operation, placing a tombstone in its place so pitiful coaster nerds like us can pay respects to this tragic giant.
Ah Intimidator 305, regarded by many as the most intense roller coaster on the planet, and it's easy to see why. This 305-foot monster at King's Dominion was the third giga coaster to ever be built, and takes a very different approach to its predecessors. Rather than the towering hills and overbanks of Cedar Point's Millennium Force, Intimidator favours low to the ground bank turns and sudden transitions, resulting in a medley of sheer brutal force. The coaster begins with a 300-foot 85-degree drop straight into a helix. Yep, unlike most coasters this side that pad out the intensity with a large airtime hill or overbank, on here you go 90 miles an hour into an ocean of blackout fueled G-force. And I don't say this lightly either. When Intimidator originally opened, this section was so intense that it caused loads of riders to physically black out. It's an endurance test, you're not here to have fun, no. Roller coasters aren't fun. They're obstacles, challenges, examples of how far we can push the human body. Well, this is Intimidator 305's motives anyway. It became such a big problem that not only did they add trims to the drop, but they had to restructure a large portion of the helix and first hill to prevent blackouts from happening. But that's just the beginning. The latter layout still has the breakneck transitions, relentless speed and sporadic temperament of a wild boar. Pretty much Intimidator 305 in a nutshell. It really did push the envelope for how far roller coasters could go, and it's easy to see why Intimidator has such a reputation in the coaster scene.
Oh Arrow, the early 90s were a busy time for you, weren't they? Phantom's Revenge at Kennywood started its life as Steel Phantom, a coaster dreamed up by Kennywood Entertainment Company president Henry Henniger, whose name, in a completely unrelated note, sounds as much like something Marvel dreamed up as the coaster itself. Maybe Steel Phantom was his alter ego? Henry wanted a record-breaking coaster for Kennywood, something to put Kennywood on the map in much the same way as the big one did for Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Only problem was, Kennywood was a little bit short on space for such a beast. Enter Arrow, who managed to work out a layout for a 225-foot drop coaster taking in 4 inversions along its layout and traversing over 3,000 feet of track. Oh, and when it first opened, it was the steepest and fastest coaster in the world. Take that, Blackpool Pleasure Beach. Turns out the coaster was hurtling along its track a little too fast, and guests began complaining of neck pain after riding, so a few days after its debut, the park took the decision to add in a few trim brakes to take the edge off. Still, it seems that Steel Phantom remained slightly too intense for purpose, as the park actually announced it would be dismantling the coaster in the year 2000 after just 9 years in operation due to continued complaints of pain and injury from guests. Cue fan outrage. The park started receiving tons of emails and letters about the decision to remove the coaster, so Kennywood took half a U-turn on the decision. The coaster wouldn't be demolished, it'd be modified instead. The inversions were removed, the lengths of the layout on first drop were increased slightly, and it reopened in 2001 as the Phantom's Revenge. The coaster is now celebrated as one of the best steel coasters on the planet.
Moving on to another steel binding thrill machine, this is Steel Vengeance at Cedar Point, manufactured by RMC, a company that keeps raising the bar after each and every project and taking the world by storm. Yet, here in Little Britain, we are still waiting for one. Thorpe Park. This conversion of the Cedar Point Classic Mean Streak had some big shoes to fill, and by God they filled them. In fact, they f***ing tore them apart. Setting an incredible 10 world record, Steel Vengeance was and still is an absolute hit. It is regarded as the pinnacle of RMC's iBox designs, pushing the envelope in every way possible. I mean, come on, let's have a look at what we're dealing with here. World's tallest hybrid coaster at 205 feet tall. World's fastest hybrid coaster at 74 miles per hour. World's steepest hybrid coaster drop at 90 degrees. World's longest hybrid coaster drop at 200 foot. World's longest hybrid coaster at 5,740 feet. Most hybrid coaster inversions at 4 in total. Fastest hybrid airtime hill at 74 miles per hour. Most hybrid coaster airtime at 27.2 seconds. Most airtime on any coaster at 27.2 seconds. World's first hybrid coaster. Fuck, that's a mouthful. But you get the gist. Steel Vengeance is an absolute beast. There is so much airtime on this thing that they installed onboard compartments to put any loose items in during the ride, because it just couldn't stop emptying people's pockets. Often, riders come off with bruised legs from the restraints due to the extreme ejector on this thing. It really is that bad. Keep an eye out for Busch Gardens Tampa next year, where RMC attempt to excel even further with a new age Gwazi. Exciting times ahead.
God, we're a little bit obsessed with the Kings Parks in this video, aren't we? Well, it's their own fault for building such ambitious and insane roller coasters. Hypersonic XLC, the XLC stands for Extreme Launch Coaster FYI, seriously, how naughties can you get? Opened at the park in late March 2001. Fresh out of the S&S factory itself, The coaster was the actual prototype that S&S built for their Thrust Air coaster model, originally called Thrust Air 2000, and zoomed to heights of 165 foot via a launch propelling riders from 0 to 80 miles an hour in just 1.8 seconds, so pretty intense stuff. As it was a prototype built in S&S's yard in Utah, the ride had to have a few slight modifications made so that the coaster could fit in the available land over at King's Dominion. You can see where this is going, can't you? S&S had to make some pretty major changes to the track, including huge modifications to the section post the iconic 90-degree drop in order to allow the coaster to bank properly. The result was pretty catastrophic, resulting in extended downtime for the new ride and a closure of nearly 3 months at the start of the 2002 season. The coaster was even reportedly so rough and shaky that rumours surfaced from park staff at the time that the combination of such an intense and speedy launch, combined with the thing ending up slightly less structurally integral than initially planned, to put it lightly, the foundations actually had to be repoured every once in a while. Danger of the thing collapsing in on itself only makes the coaster more fun, right? So yeah, essentially a combination of having to literally hammer the thing into place to fit King's Dominion's footprint, use of helicopter wheels on the trains, seriously S&S? Multiple train redesigns and a buttload of cash down the drain, downtime and disappointed customers later, King's Dominion finally decided to close Hypersonic XLC in 2007 after just 6 years of intermittent operation.
What do you get when Aerodynamics decide to do B&M? Drachen Fire is the result. Drachen Fire at Busch Gardens Williamsburg was far too ambitious for its own good, allowing for Arrow to step right out of their comfort zone. Arrow's biggest competition back then was the newly formed B&M, with coasters miles ahead of their time. Parks all wanted a piece of the cake. I mean, who could blame them? They're smooth, reliable, innovative, a big hit with the crowds. Busch Gardens approached Arrow with Cumber's design in mind, which was set to open in 1993, the following year after Drachen Fire debuts. Arrow obviously saw this as an opportunity to study B&M and attempt to recreate an experience similar to their coasters. Remember back in school and used to copy the smartest kid in class but could never get it quite right? Well, this is it. Arrow tried to make Drachen Fire as B&M as possible, from larger inversions, more curves, similar support style, and even the computer was not far from what B&M coasters use. They even wanted to mimic Cumber's threaded loop, but opted for an awkward 100-foot high corkscrew instead, which is probably the most stupidest thing I've ever seen, sorry Arrow. Case in point is, Drachen Fire is an Arrow coaster with the same archaic, clunky track shaping that is trying too hard to be B&M and ultimately fails. The coaster opened to very mixed reviews, many commenting on its rough ride, jarring transitions, and the fact that almost 15 years before Drachen Fire opened, Arrow had already built a far superior looping coaster within the park, Loch Ness Monster. The park tried countlessly to remedy the damage done by Drachen Fire, removing inversions such as the cutback and one of the corkscrews in place for empty straight track, warning guests to take earrings out to avoid potential ear bleeding, and penultimately closing the whole thing down in 1998 because it just wasn't getting the love that they were hoping for. Drachen Fire only lasted 5 to 6 years, and I believe that's an indication that this coaster was an unfortunate failure in the end run.
Thanks so much for having me, guys. Thanks Chris as well for inviting me on. I've had so much fun talking on this video with you guys. Yeah, and like and subscribe and all that stuff. I think Chris is going to put some links in the description. But yeah, thanks for watching. Cheers.
Thanks for watching. I hope you yet again enjoyed this video. Comment below your thoughts on the coasters featured in this episode and any that you think we've missed. A huge thanks to Cupcakes and Coaster for joining us on this video. Make sure to check them out, link in the description below. Make sure to hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. Smash subscribe if you want more content like this, and give the bell a flick to be the first to see our videos when they pop up. Latest video on the top left, random video on the bottom left, and check out the buttons over on the right to subscribe to Cupcakes and Coasters and ourselves. Thanks for watching guys, try a bit.